Hello and welcome everybody. Welcome to this webinar. We are going to start in 2 minutes exactly, just to wait for a few individuals. But I would appreciate if you can just indicate in the chat that you can hear my voice and see the screen clearly. All right, awesome. We will start in 1 minute exactly. All right, everybody, welcome to this webinar. It is the webinar number 12 in the series of Navigating the Cyberland. I'm your host, Abid Samhouri. And the topic of this webinar is going to be malware analysis with volatility. I would like to draw your attention that this webinar is recorded and you can view the recorded session on app.lifestore.co/axon-technologies. And you can even view the previous recorded sessions as well over there. Okay, sorry, it was muted by mistake. Fran, what was the last thing you heard me? If you can just indicate on the chat, I will go back to the slide. Okay. So let me start from the beginning, from the table of the content. So the agenda is going to be like this. We'll give an overview of the forensics, digital forensics and memory analysis. And then we'll talk about how to acquire a RAM image and how to do memory acquisition. And then we'll talk about volatility tool and volatility framework. And then within volatility, there are different commands. We will learn about the profiles of volatility. We'll learn about process commands. We'll learn about network commands, and then how to dump the process and memory. Digital forensics is composed of multiple phases. When you go into a digital forensics project, you start with collection in the beginning, and then examination, then analysis, and then reporting. Collection is where you collect data from various sources that are relevant to the incident. You collect those data, you preserve them, and you keep them secure. This is collection. Examination is where you shuffle through the collected data to find and to filter out which data is relevant to the incident and which data is not relevant to the incident. And then you take the data that is relevant to the incident and then you do analysis. Analysis is finding out exactly what happened and how to recover from it. And then finally, you present your report to the client. When it comes to collected data, there are different sources that we need to collect. Usually data can be classified in 3 different broad categories. The first one is what we call the non-volatile data. Non-volatile is the data that is that survives a shutdown. So when you shut down the system, the data remains stored on the disk. And this is usually the media for non-volatile data are disk, whether they are hard disk or SSDs. And then when you get access to that data, you have access to all the applications that are there, to the entire file systems and all the files and folders, as well as all the logs and log files. However, there's another type of data that's also critical, and that's very important. And usually people omit sometimes or oversee. And that is the volatile data. Volatile data is the data that does not survive shutdown. So when you switch off the machine, when you shut down the machine, the system, this data is lost forever. And this data resides in the memory, resides in the RAM, the random access memory. And we know that RAM, when you shut down the machine, it is gone forever. But it contains sometimes very important data that you cannot find on disk. And on volatile data on RAM, you have things like the processes, the sockets, the established connections, okay, and DLLs that are loaded by the processes. You have the modules, the drivers. So there is also, this is also a place of wealth information that you can find. And then finally, the third type of data or the source of data is the network traffic. This is also very relevant to forensics, to collect network traffic and to collect full packet capture. So in today's presentation, we're gonna focus only on volatile data, and that is the memory or the RAM. So why memory analysis? Why we wanna focus on RAM? You know, a malware, no matter how it can hide on the disk, ultimately it needs to run. And whenever a malware runs, it is there in memory, okay? It is always there in memory. It is either as a separate process by itself or part of another process. So it could be like a malicious process, or it could be a malicious code injected inside a legitimate process. That's why it's very important when there is an incident, when there is an attack, when there is an intrusion, that you never turn off your machine, okay? Because if you turn it off immediately, you're gonna lose this data that is in the RAM. So the best approach when a machine is infected is you simply isolate it from the network, okay? You take it off the network and you keep it alive. And once you take an image of the RAM, you acquire the RAM, you take the image now and you preserve it, then at that time you can switch off the machine. In RAM, we can find multiple things, but two very important things are the processes that are running, okay, and the network connections, the active network connections. Now, the running processes now, inside the running processes, you can find many other things, like whether the process is accessing a file, whether it's accessing the registry key, whether it has DLL, associated DLL, etc., etc., etc. And the network connections show any live connections from the machine to the outside world. If we want to compare taking a disk image versus a memory dump, memory dump is generally quick, so doing it is gonna take less time. While if you wanna image a hard disk or SSD or a disk in general, it's gonna take longer time, and this is due to the size itself. So a memory can be, for example, 16 gigabyte or maximum 32. It could be 8 gigabyte or even less. While a disk could be quarter tera, could be half tera, could be tera. So that's why it will take long time. And also, when you want to transfer it, it's also very costly. So imagine transferring a half tera file that is a disk image dump. It's going to be costly. You cannot carry it on USB. You need maybe another hard disk to copy it to. But the RAM dump is very easy to copy it. That's why when there is a forensic project, you start with the RAM, and then you take the RAM, and then you start working on the RAM. Meanwhile, the disk is being imaged. So let us talk about now memory acquisition. How would you go around and actually copy and duplicate and take an image or a dump of the entire RAM? There are different tools that can perform that. Volatility is not one of them, by the way. Volatility is to analyze the acquired image file. But one very common tool and very popular tool and has become the de facto tool for acquiring RAM is WinPMem. It's an open source. It is multi-platform. It can work on Linux, Unix, and Mac. Okay, it's very, very simple and easy to use. You only need to run this command. Okay, the command itself of the file, and then you give it the output file. Let me show you here a quick demo of that. So I have here Windows 7 machine. I'm gonna switch it off, switch it on. I also have Windows 10 running here. I'm gonna switch it on. So I have downloaded the WinPMem. Okay. So I have downloaded over here, and as you can see it, it's right here. Okay, it's WinPMem Mini x86, and then you only have to use it, and then you give it the output file name. I'm calling here Win7 RAM dump.raw. Okay, you hit enter. Sorry, and then it will take few minutes to actually take the dump. And by the way, when you analyze a dump that has been generated using WinPMem, of course, you're going to see a process, so it is done. And if you do dir, you should find, this is the file over here, okay? This is the file over here. So it's 500 megabyte because this is the memory over here. So, so as I said, you're going to find a process called WinPMem as part of the processes that are running inside this dump, because the WinPMem will actually run as a process, and then it will copy everything, including its own process. Okay. So once you have it, you simply can copy it now to a Linux tool where you have volatility on, and you start working using, you start analyzing it using volatility. So what is volatility? Volatility has become the de facto tool for memory analysis, for RAM analysis. Was created in 2007. The first version of it was developed in 2007, created by Aaron Walters, and they have founded the volatilityfoundation.org to actually protect the tool and protect its copyright. It's open source, and this is the beautiful thing about it. And it also works on Windows, Mac, and Linux, and it is written in Python, which means you need, of course, Python in order for it to execute and run. So you need Python platform, runtime environment, so that you execute volatility. To install it on your Kali Linux, of course, if you have Python, then you simply need to download the Git package from GitHub, okay, using Git clone, and then you simply change the change mode, change the permission, and then you will have it ready. It's not available as part of the apt-get on Linux or Ubuntu. It is available as Git package from GitHub. And the Volatility Foundation, they have a wiki with memory samples. Just to show you here, if I open this link, the memory sample is, it will take you to this web page where it has many memory samples that you can download so you can practice volatility on. And for today, we are gonna work on multiple images. I have already downloaded Gridx. Okay, I also have another memory dump of an infected of a RAM infected by Stuxnet, and I also have some other malware. So the first thing you need to do when you have an image, okay, I just want to point something out, that if you have taken a memory dump of a live system, then usually the extension will be .raw, as you can see here, .raw. Okay, if you have taken it from a live system. However, if you have taken a RAM dump from a virtual machine, okay, then the extension will be vmem, as you can see here, credix.vmem. So vmem means it's a memory dump of a virtual machine, while .raw means it's a memory dump of a live system. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is, of course, you would run volatility using vol.py, okay, and then you will give it -f, which means the file. Then you give it the memory dump file, the memory dump that you have already captured. After the memory dump file, you have the option to insert many commands or different commands. Okay, we have here the first command you need to do is the image info. Image info is the command that will give you some information about this memory dump. And this information is going to help you actually continue your analysis. So on Gridx, for example, if I issue this command, I get this output. I see different things. I want you to focus on two important things here. Of course, you can see, for example, number of processors. We have one processor, the service pack 3, and for example, image date and time, so and so, and so on. I want you to focus on the profile, this suggested profile. Profiles are built-in schema of how Volatility should interpret or understand a memory dump. Okay, because the memory layout changes from OS to OS. So Windows XP, for example, Service Pack 2 is different than, let's say, Windows Vista, is different than Windows 7, and so on. So each OS has its own memory layout, and Volatility has profiles that match those structures of every OS, and it can understand, interpret, and go through the structures, and it can parse the memory dump. So here is giving us two profiles, the WinXP SP2, okay, and WinXP SP3, okay. Now we have to try each one separately to see which one works, okay. So the second thing I want you to pay attention to is the KDBG. KDBG, this stands for kernel debugging. It stands for kernel debugging data block, okay? And this is a structure in memory, okay? Usually the OS maintains it, and it has information about the processes and associated data about them, and also the drivers that are loaded. And inside it, we can have access to different data structures and links that we can extract information about what's going on, okay? So, once you have done so, let me do this example over here. So I'm gonna go to my Kali Linux here, okay? I have multiple images. For example, I have critics. This is the critics.vmem. Okay. I also have proleco.vmem. This is another vulnerable RAM, and we have stuxnet.vmem. Okay. If I do image info for each one of them, so it's vol.py, and then we give it the file name. So I'm gonna do on proleco.vmem, and then image info. You see, it is trying to determine the profile based on the kernel debugging block, okay? So it might take some time. By the way, ignore all of these errors. This error, just there is a missing library. Missing library crypto.hash, but it can be fixed. I mean, it's not a big deal. So we can see here, we have almost suggested profile, just like the previous one. We have the kernel debugging and so on. Once I have the suggested profile, I can now use it in order to parse the image and add more commands. So how do I tell it which profile to use? I simply say profile equals, and then I give it the name of the profile. Okay. The first command now we're gonna look at is the PSLIST. Okay, PSLIST. Let me go back here to the slide. The PSLIST in the kernel debugging structure. Okay, there is a double link. Okay, a double link list called active process links. And as you can see here on the graph to the right side, this list contains the available processes in memory in a link chain. Okay, so process A has a block about it, and then there is pointer. It has two pointers. One pointer to the process that is before it, and one pointer to the process that is after it. So each process is connected to the one before it and one after it in a circular way. So if you traverse this double linked list on one node, then ultimately you go back to the same node. So what PSLIST does is it accesses this double linked list, okay, and then it traverses it, and whenever it sees a process, it simply prints out the information about it. The process name, the process ID, number of threads, number of handles, also the parent process ID, as we can see here. So we have a list of processes running inside the image, okay? System process, SMSS, .exe, CSRSS, and so on, with the process ID, parent process ID, threads, and so on. So if we go here and we do this right here, for example, we can find the processes that are running inside the memory image, okay, by running this command over here, PSLIST. So I'm listing it. Okay. Now, of course, you need to understand the valid Windows processes, what they are, and you have to understand their sequence. We will talk about this in a while, and you can identify if there is any process that is weird. Okay, so just by looking at this, your first instinct is to identify something that is weird, either by its name or something that has a legitimate name, but it is out of sequence, meaning it is not run by its legitimate parent. Okay, so there are different ways to handle that. I'm going to talk about it in a minute. So what I want you to know is PSLIST simply lists the processes that are available, but list them through the double linked list, okay, in the kernel debugging block. This is the most important thing. Another command is will give me exactly the same data as the PSLIST, but it will simply put them in a hierarchical way, okay, hierarchical way from parent to child to sub-child and so on. So it will give me a visual image of the processes and how they are spawned from their parent processes. So instead of giving them to me just like that in a flat way, okay, and then I have to track the PPID for each one to see which one is coming after each one. Here it tells me, for example, system spawns SMSS, SMSS goes to when log on spawns LSAS and services, okay, and then services spawns VM tools, SVC host spool SV, and so on, and SVC host goes to this or spawn this one, and so on. And then one thing I want you to notice, the explorer.exe does not have a parent process. It usually comes by itself, and we will know why Y in a while. Okay, so PSTREE gives you the same information as PSLIST, however, it's a little bit visually appealing. So you have to study each process along with its PID and PPID and make a map of them and study the chain and look for anything that is out of the ordinary. Windows processes have the following chain. Usually the first process is system, okay, and then system spawns SMSS, and the SMSS is the session management process, and then CSRSS is related to the graphical interface, and then when log on for taking credentials. So these two are spawned by the session management process. And then the when log on spawns services process, LSAS process, and something called user init process. The user init process creates explorer.exe and then the user init exits. So it creates a process and then it exits. That's why explorer.exe remains running but has no parent. It has PPID, okay, of the user init, but then you won't see it in memory. And in services can spawn multiple SVC hosts. Okay, so this is very important for you to recognize. I want you to notice here that there should be only one when log on, LSAS, services, CSRSS, SMSS, and system. So if you ever see another service, another process with one of these names, that other process is suspicious. You only need to figure out which one of them. However, the SVC host, there could be multiple occurrences of them. So, and this is one way malware usually create themselves under this name, SVC host, because usually you get confused and you don't know which one of them is legitimate, which one is malicious. So you have to do extra effort. So I want you now to know something very important. Malware can hide themselves sometimes from PSLIST. I told you that PSLIST look at the double linked list available in the kernel debugging, and then it traverses that list and prints you the processes. However, this list is editable. So a malware can actually unlink itself from that chain. Okay, so when you traverse that chain, instead of seeing A, B, C, D, you will see only A, B, C, while D, you don't see it. It is not listed, even though it is still running in memory. So it is running in memory, it is doing its nasty thing, but when you do PSLIST, it is not there. It's not there in the list, on the double linked list. Okay, and this method of hiding is called direct kernel object manipulation, DKOM. Okay, direct kernel object manipulation. Malware and rootkit usually do it to hide themselves or unlink themselves. So what do we do? Volatility has a command called PSSCAN. PSSCAN, unlike the PSLIST, it doesn't traverse the list. It goes and scans the entire it scans the entire image for processes. Okay, so because of that, it can catch any process that is not linked on that list. So if you go here to okay, and if we look at this malware, okay, the Proleco malware over here, and we do PSLIST, okay, PSTREE, as you can see here. Okay, and then we do another one with PSSCAN. We will notice that PSSCAN can find other processes. One of them is one dog RC data 61. Okay, so this is another process that was not found by PSLIST because it has unlinked itself from the list. Who is the parent process of one dog RC data? We can see it's 1136 over here, and that is the immunity debugger over here. So the immunity debugger created this process and it is hidden. Okay, and the PS3 we found the immunity debugger, okay, but we did not find it's a child process, so it was hidden. So PSSCAN go and scan the memory entirely for any process, irrespective whether it exists on the double linked list or not. Another thing that's also very unique with PSSCAN is you can integrate it with the GRAPHVIZ. GRAPHVIZ is a tool, open source, that you can really download it from graphviz.org, or you can install it from apt-get. Okay, and then you can produce a dot file, which then you can convert it to PostScript file with an image. If you do that, so you simply add PSSCAN command as we have done, and then the output format will be dot. Dot is the language that is used by GRAPHVIZ, and then the output file you give it, for example, processes dot dot. Okay, and then you convert the dot file, okay, using the dot command to a PostScript file with PS extension. Once you have that, okay, then you can find, for example, the PS file. Okay, I have it already here. You can have it, and you can have now a graphical representation of all the processes. So if I zoom in, okay, you can see the graph over here. Okay, the chain of the processes and how they are represented. You can see here from the PSSCAN, we have the immunity debug process created by Explorer, the desktop. Okay, and then the immunity debugger created the, as you can see, the one dog RC data. Okay, the chain. So it's a beautiful thing to have a representation of all the processes. Okay, this is something always you have to investigate every process when it comes to memory analysis. Every process you have to be meticulous in it, verify the PID, PPID. Okay, so this is the graph over here. Another command that's also very powerful in catching hidden processes is the PSXVIEW. Okay, PSXVIEW. PSXVIEW performs additional methods of trying to find the processes, and those additional methods rely on references to the process. So sometimes a process can be hidden from the PS list. Okay. However, okay, it might need to access a file, okay, and create a handle, okay. So that handle to access that file is a reference to itself. So if you try to analyze the handles, the file handles, the registry handles, etc., you can find references to those hidden processes. So PSXView has different methods of checking references to processes, and then it will give you the output, and the output will be in the following format. There will be columns, okay? There will be columns, each column representing a method, for example, PSLIST, PSSCAN, thread proc, etc., etc. And then under each column, you can see whether the process is found on that method or not. A true means it has been found, and false means it was not found. Okay, false means it was not found. So when you go through this list, the output, whenever you see false in a column, it indicates that the process was not found in that particular method or in that particular way. Okay, so looking at the results again, we can see that one dog RC data, for example, was not found in PSLIST, but it was found using other methods. All the other methods actually found this particular process. Let's do it here. So all I need to do now is simply to change the command PSXVIEW, okay? And it's gonna take some time because each process is being checked in multiple ways: PSLIST, PSSCAN, thread, etc. Sessions. Okay, we can see here the same output that was in the snapshot. Okay, this is the file we are interested in. So this file was hidden actually, and it was created by Immunity Debugger. Okay. Now, let's be aware of certain ways processes sometimes or malware try to hide themselves. Okay, you should know these tricks so that you can catch them. The first trick is when a malware uses the name of a valid system process. For example, it will create itself as LSAS. LSAS is the Local Security Authority subsystem. It is the process responsible for all the security authentication and authorization, privileges and access control on Windows system. And if you remember, if we go back to the slides over here, you can see that the LSAS actually created by WinLogOn. Okay, and there should be only one LSAS. So a malware creates itself as LSAS. Okay, what do you do now? How would you distinguish the valid LSAS from the malicious LSAS? Okay, the PID is not the way to look at. Okay, some people might look at the PID and assume that the smaller PID is the legitimate one, while the higher PID is the malicious one. This is not very accurate. What you need to do is look at the parent process ID. Who is the parent process? LSAS must always be created by WinLogOn. Okay, a malware calling itself LSAS will never be created by WinLogOn. It might be created by explorer.exe if it was launched from the desktop, from the userland. Okay, so if you see an LSAS and its parent process is explorer.exe, then this is a red flag. This should give you a very big red flag, and it should be a warning that this is actually something malicious. Not only with LSAS, with any other system process. Okay. The other trick that also can be used is the parent process trick. Okay. Now we knew that with LSAS, its parent process is WinLogOn. Okay, and you cannot really create a malware where the parent process is WinLogOn. However, I told you earlier that SVC host is created by services.exe. Again, let's go back to our image here. Services is created by winlogon, okay? And then services creates SVC host, and multiple SVC hosts can exist. Now, what is unique about services is if you come and install a service and you run something as a service on Windows, the parent process is always going to be services.exe. And this is what hackers do. They create a service and they call this service SVC host, and then they run it. And because of that, you are going to see SVC host in memory, and the parent process is services.exe, and now you're confused. Which one now is legitimate and which one is not legitimate? Now, the best way really, there are some advanced forensics here, but one way is to extract the content of all those SVC hosts along with their associated DLL, and then you have to examine them one by one, okay? One by one. So here you are stepping more into advanced forensics techniques. Another command we can run, okay, is the CONNSCAN, okay? CONNSCAN is a command that gives you the active connections, that were active when the machine was running, okay? Every active connection is actually represented in memory, and then when you take the memory image, then you can access those active connections and you can see them. You can see them from the source IP address and source port number to the remote IP address and remote port number. Let's look at it live here. So on the first image, which is ProLago, I'm gonna do CONNSCAN. Okay, I have two connections, okay, from the local host. So the IP address of the machine where the app was taken was 172.16.176. Sorry, .176.143. Okay, and it has a connection to an external IP 67.208.216.86. Now you can see from here also there is the PID. What is the PID? The PID is the process that created this connection. It is the process that created this connection. And if we go up here and look for 1136, we can find that it is immunity debugger. So the immunity debugger that has spawned our hidden process is actually the one that is creating the network connections, okay, to the external IP address. Let's look at another image. I'm gonna do PSSCAN on Stuxnet. Okay, so these are the processes on Stuxnet, and let me do CONNSCAN. Okay, on Stuxnet there are no active connections. Okay, on the last one, let me do PSSCAN on Credix. These are the processes, CONNSCAN. Okay, we can see here we have again a few connections. Again, from the local IP address 172.16.112.128 to two different IP addresses. One is the 41.168.5.140. The second is somebody is asking, Elena is asking, maybe the profile for Stuxnet is different. The profile is actually correct. Okay, the profile is correct, because if the profile was not correct, then the command itself will not work. So in here, we did not get it because the profile was actually wrong. We didn't get it because there was no active connections on that machine. Okay, if the wrong profile is being used, then you actually will get an error of a mismatch. Okay, so we have connections to two different remote IP addresses, and we can see that the PID is 1484, and if you go back and check for 1484, it is the Explorer. Okay, it is the Explorer. So the Explorer is making this connection, which is strange. Okay, it's strange. But looking at this, analyzing the processes here, okay, who can notice a relation between the connection performed by Explorer and another process that could be related to this connection? And if you know the answer, you might type it on the chat. We haven't done PSLIST on this malware, Credex malware, but here in the PSSCAN, okay, these are the processes, and we know that Explorer has done two connections. Who can notice something that might be related to this connection in the process list? Anyone? Exactly, Dimitri. Reader SL. Okay. Reader SL was created by Explorer.exe. Okay. So we can see here Reader SL was created by Explorer.exe. Okay. And we have a connection from Explorer.exe, which probably was triggered by the Reader SL. Okay, so Reader SL created that connection in the context of Explorer.exe. Okay, so if we need to investigate something on this memory here, memory dump, we need to investigate Reader SL. Okay, just like on the previous one, we need to investigate that hidden file that we found, okay, which was spawned by the immunity debugger. So we need this and probably this. We need to investigate these two. Okay, we will come to how to actually extract the exe file and study it. Another command other than the CONNSCAN is the sockets command. Now, the difference between CONNSCAN and sockets will give me what ports are being in binding state, okay, on the local machine, regardless if there is an active connection or not. Okay, while active connections mean something has been established, like there was TCP handshake or some communication of some form. So let's do sockets. And usually sockets will not reveal interesting information at the CONNSCAN, but let us try it. So critics sockets. So here we have the sockets. The sockets will print me data, the process ID, okay, on which port it is listening, okay, on which port. The proto and the protocol, usually the proto is the number of the protocol. So UDP will have a proto number 17, TCP will have a proto number 6. So these are standard in the TCP IP stack. And on which IP it is bound, all available interfaces, or on a specific IP address. Somebody is asking about end of life. Exactly. Actually, Volatility 3 is already out there. Okay, so you can get Volatility 3. And by the way, Volatility 3, one of the advantage of Volatility 3 is you do not need to specify profiles. Okay, so it has automatic way of detecting profiles and then using the profile without really requiring you to actually add profiles or play with the profile. So there's no, like, they have eliminated this in Volatility 3. And Volatility 3 is available on their website, by the way. So you can go to their website, you can find it. Thank you, Brahima, for the question. So aside from the CONNSCAN, the active connections, and also the sockets, okay, we can check the CMD line. The CMD line is also a very critical thing. The CMD line will give me the command line argument, okay, that actually ran the process, okay? So we know, for example, when you run a process from a command line, you type its name. For example, when I ran winpmem, for example, here, okay, I type this, and this will actually create a process. So this will be the command line associated with the winpmem process. So the CMD line will give me the command line of every process. So on Credix, for example, let's go to CMD line, and then it will tell me how each process was ran. So for example, reader SL, simply it was run by itself directly, okay? Sometimes a command is run with arguments, like this one here, okay? And then this one has certain arguments. So you can view the arguments that were given to the command line. For example, this SVC host, okay, we know there are multiple occurrences of SVC host. What differ between them is each one has its unique CMD line. So this one has -K, decom launch, RPCSS, net SVCS, network service, local service. Okay, so these are the differences between each SVC host instance. Looking at this, for example, this was run with many arguments over here. Okay, so sometimes you can get a hint of what the malware is doing if it is running with some, let's say, with some arguments that's giving it like certain IP addresses or port if it's establishing network connection. Okay, so CMD line is very handy here. Let us look, for example, at the Proleco, for example, the one with the immunity debugger. Okay, if we look at this one, notice here how the immunity debugger, okay, when it was run, it was given the argument of another exe file. So this exe file was given as an argument to immunity debugger, which then immunity debugger ran the other exe file with a trick to hide it. Okay. Immunity debugger, by the way, is a pen testing tool. Okay, used for reverse engineering. So it has some tricks like hiding processes and so on. Other commands that can give me command line or command history are consoles and CMD scan. They simply scan certain structures, the console information and command history structures, and if there are any history of commands available in those structures, they will be printed on the screen for us. So let us do the CMD scan. CMD scan and console. Okay, we couldn't find anything, and console. Okay, so those structures are empty. Nothing is saved in the history. Okay, while the CMD line preserves the command line for each process. So this is something preserved. We have two commands before we go to the dumping of the memory and the exe file. These two commands are the handles and the DLL list. Handles, each process when it executes, it might need to communicate with the registry. It might need to communicate with files on the hard disk. Okay, it might need to work with signals, etc., etc. These are events. So all of these are called handles. Okay, so handles is a generic term for the files, the registry keys, the tickets, etc., the keys that are being accessed by a process. So the command handles will simply tell me what handles are being opened for each process. Okay. Now, in order not to, if I simply type handles here, it will give me a very large output. Okay. But I can be more specific and give it like a certain particular PID. So let me investigate, for example, the PID that was hidden of that file. So for example, this one. So let me give it 133. Sorry, there was something wrong here. So I give it the process ID. So it will give me the handles only for this process. Okay, so it could not. Okay, it could not because it's not in the list. But let me do it for PSLIST. Let me do it for the immunity debugger. So if I go to the, it's 1136. 1136. Okay, so the immunity debugger has all of these handles open for it. Okay, like it's accessing the directory, it's accessing the file. Okay, some keys, some registry keys over here. Okay, registry keys, etc., etc. Okay, all of these give you like a source of information to investigate, to look at, to see if there's anything suspicious. And as you can see here, it is accessing a process. So there is a handle, an open handle. There is like a channel between the immunity debugger and this process, the one.rc data. Okay. Let's check the handles for the reader SL. Okay. So the reader SL is on the Credix malware. So reader SL is here, the 1640. So it says cannot find 1640. Oh, okay. Thank you. I have to change here the credits. Okay. Thank you, Brahima. Okay. These are the handles for the reader SL. Okay. Again, directories, files, registry keys, etc. Okay. Another thing that's also very important is the DLL list. Okay. DLL list simply tells me which DLL files are accessed and used by a certain process. Okay. Again, I can give it like a certain process ID, and then I type here DLL list, or I can print everything for all processes, and the output will be huge. Okay, because every process has its own DLL. So for example, this process, these are the DLL associated with it. And then the previous one, okay, this is the DLL, and so on. So if there's something I am actually suspicious of, like the 1640, then I can print only the DLLs of that particular process. Okay, so these are the DLL for the reader SSL. Okay, now the final thing I want you to know is it is not enough simply to look at this. Volatility can extract for us the actual exe file from memory, and then you can do further analysis on that exe file. And you can even extract the portion of the memory related to that process, and then on a separate file and investigate that file. And for that, we have two commands, the memory dump and the proc dump. Memory dump simply takes all the memory pages related to that process and dump it on its own file. And then you can do so many things. One way you can analyze the dump file here is you can check the strings inside that dump file. So if you run, for example, on the critics on the reader SL process, the memory dump and extract it, okay, we have this memory dump here, okay, then we can extract the strings of it and save it on a separate file. And then you can check what strings are associated with that. And I have already done so over here. It is the 16440, and I can open it here. And these are the strings associated or resident inside the memory of the reader SL. Okay. And notice here, as we go through this, we notice a lot of domain names here. Okay. A lot of domain names. And many of them have to do with banks. So bank.com, chase.com, Bank of America, okay, business app home, secure banking. So it could be a malware, a banking malware, okay, a banking malware. A malware that hides, for example, access, that hijacks access to certain banks and then steals the credentials while you are typing the credentials to those banks. It could be, I'm not sure, but just by looking at those domains, we can find something suspicious. And we can now know why it is establishing the connection we saw earlier, probably to send those credentials outside. And we can notice here, okay, this is the connection to this IP address. It's built in. Okay, account, authorized.net, some even HTML code and JavaScript code. You can go down here. You can see all the system calls that are being called by this process. Okay, and so many other things. You can find IP addresses, even base64. Okay. So again, if you have time, you can study and analyze the strings generated by the memory dump. Another thing you can do is you can extract the entire exe file itself using proc dump command. The same as we did with the memory dump here, with the memory dump, okay? But instead of mem dump, I simply change it to proc dump, okay? Proc dump. And then I have the exe file. So I have already generated the exe file, which is this one, okay, related to the same process, okay, and I have taken it to another Windows machine that I have created as a sandbox, okay, and then you can do now malware analysis on it. And if any of you have watched the webinar I have done a few months ago about malware analysis, I covered the tools that are necessarily for dynamic analysis and the static analysis of executable files. Now that you have taken this, extracted the process over here, okay, extract not the process, the executable file itself, you can simply transfer it and now perform static analysis and dynamic analysis as well. One great tool, I've already downloaded it, where, okay, this is the one. Let me check if real-time protection is still off. Because if real-time protection is on, then probably it's going to delete that virus directly. Okay, so you can open this file using a tool like PSTREE and then investigate it. So you take the executable, you dump it in PSTREE. For example, we can check indicators here. We can see that some strings are blacklisted. We can see something called the virus total. So PSTREE gives you the result of virus total directly without you needing to upload it manually. So it does it for you, okay? And also the blacklisted symbols or system calls. And if you go to strings, for example, you can see the embedded strings here, and you can check the blacklisted strings. Okay, these are all memory functions: get current process ID, current thread ID, terminate process. Okay, so they do process manipulation, and also imported system calls. Okay, many have detected as malware. Okay, Semantic, for example, Palo Alto Bitdefender, Trend Micro, and so on. We can do the same thing for the other processes that we have found suspicious, like the one spawned by Immunity Debugger. I've already extracted it, okay, and I already tested it and found similar result that it was suspicious, and the virus total also coded as a virus. Okay. This is basically it, guys, for today's webinar. Okay, because after this, after extracting the process dump, okay, you go into the field of simply you go into the field of malware analysis, the typical malware analysis with the static and dynamic analysis and sandboxing and all of that. I really advise any of you who haven't watched that webinar, please watch it, because it's going to complement this webinar. Okay, so knowing the dynamic and static analysis skills along with memory analysis skills combined, it will like they will complement each other. Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Any questions, guys, so far? Any questions on volatility? I hope you get some useful information about volatility. This is really scratching the surface of memory analysis. There are a lot of advanced topics that you can jump into. And if there is no more question, we can close it here. Thank you again. Thank you, Brahima, Dimitri, Rina, Kevin. Thank you, Fran. What if your profile, somebody is asking, Eli is asking, what if your profile is not present in volatility? Well, volatility has a profile to cover even modern Windows OS, okay? 7, 8, Windows 2016 servers. So I'm not sure if there is particular OS version that you have encountered that is not covered in volatility. The latest build for Windows 10. Then you can either find another tool or you can wait for volatility to build the profile for that. But I'm sure volatility team are working around the clock to develop the right profile for that version. Okay. Of course, you can find for earlier Windows 10 versions, but maybe for the latest build, maybe it's gonna take some time. Or of course, Volatility 3. Recal, by the way, is another great tool for memory analysis, and sometimes Recal can find you stuff that volatility cannot, even though volatility is the most popular. It's good to even learn Recal with it and complement what you find in volatility with Recal. Okay. If any of you would like to know more about this subject, there is a very nice book which I love. The book is called, just one second. The book is called Malware Analyst Cookbook. Okay, Malware Analyst Cookbook. I'm gonna type it over here. It comes with a DVD and many sample malware you can practice on. So Malware Analysts Cookbook. Okay, it's a great book. With that, we conclude this webinar. Thank you again very much, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you in future webinars.